me go ahead and introduce you. So I'm Laina Orlando, and I am doing another episode of Align with Laina. And the purpose of these events is for me to introduce ordinary people who, just like me, have undergone an extraordinary spiritual awakening. Now, every one of my guests is in a different level in their journey. Everybody is in a different place, but we're all making our way back to the truth of who we are. The awakening process is a journey known as the dark night of the soul. And what that means is we are going to be uncovering all of the darkness that has covered up our light. What that means is that we have to question every belief that we have that is not congruent with the truth of who we are. You see, the truth of who we are is that we are these magnificent beings. We are divine beings having a human experience. Every one of us is an expression of the divine creator of all that is. It doesn't matter what we call it. Call it God, call it spirit, source, call it Buddha, call it Bambi. It does not care what we call it because it holds us inside of itself. So it's not concerned that we don't know what it is. It is simply waiting for us to recognize who we are. It knows what it is. But we need to use our free will to make the decision to will ourselves into the freedom of the belief systems that have limited our perception of who we really are. Not only of who we are, but of who everybody is. You see, we have all been conditioned to believe very little of ourselves. We have all been conditioned to believe that we are somehow these puny little humans running around on this planet, surviving, trying to make a life for ourselves. But in reality, we are an expression of the divine. We exist inside of the consciousness of the Creator. So the spiritual journey is the process, and it takes many, many years. I've been on my journey for 15 years. Now, I can assure you that I know the truth, but I'm still practicing living it. Walking my talk, having that congruency is what the journey is all about. And one of the people that has done this work is doing the work is Chasity. And I wanted to invite her so that she and I can have a dialogue about her story in hopes that it will inspire you. Maybe you'll find some common threads in there between her story and yours, her story and my story, that can help you on your journey. Because the purpose of Align with Laina is to help everybody get that this journey happens to ordinary people. It's not just special people. It's the ordinary person. So let me introduce you to Chasity. Chasity, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, tell me, what was your life like before you began the process of the spiritual journey, when you really knew that you were beginning to search for something? Take me to your life before that, and let's set the stage for the audience so they get to know what your life was like before.
Well, I moved to Atlanta around 19 years old. I had just gotten fresh out of a divorce from a relationship I had been in for 5 years. Completely lost, just, trying to get out in the world, figure out who I am, where I'm going. Shortly after that, I lost my father in 2014, and things got pretty dark at that point. My son was born in 2005, so he was conceived just after my father passed, and he was born with some medical issues. Mm-hmm. So probably from 2004 until 2011, life was just a whirlwind.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I was in the process of really trying to grow up, be an adult, be a mother, figure out life, the house and the cars and the jobs and wherever I'm going next in life. And, my dad was my best friend, so I felt pretty lonely.
Yeah. So tell me, how did you feel at that time about who you are? Who you were at that moment? Take me to your mindset at that time.
Yeah, I felt lost. I mean, really, I had no idea who I was. The person who had truly given me my identity was gone.
Yeah.
And I was just, I didn't know where to go. Thankfully, I had a really amazing teacher in my life at the time, and she was actually my boss.
Oh,
Definitely an angel.
yeah.
And
They do show up, don't they, at the right and perfect time?
absolutely. So, and it was Janie Lassick. I met her when Parrish was about a year old, and I went to work for her and her husband, and she just kind of took me under her wing. It's like I had that mothering
Yeah,
person in my life that really saw me.
yeah.
Yeah, and started to listen to some things that I was going through, and she helped me a lot just to see a lot of things I was asleep to.
So,
Um,
so tell me a little bit before you talk about things that you were asleep to. And thank you for being so vulnerable, because I know this is always a very touching thing. And I understand I lost both of my parents, and actually it was my mother's passing that got me to start my spiritual journey. But when you say that you began to see how asleep you were, say a little bit about what was it that Janie was saying or introducing you to that was having you begin to notice that you were asleep.
I mean, it's hard to pinpoint just one general thing, but she was helping me
Talk about
realize the
all of it.
patterns.
Talk about all of it. It's not just one
Yeah,
general thing.
she was helping me to realize the patterns, for one, that I was going through and repeating and repeating and repeating in my life, and how I was really looking outside of myself
Yeah,
for answers rather than inside. Like at that time in my life, I didn't know who I was. It's like I didn't know there was a me to look at.
yeah.
Everything was outside of me. This person did this. My dad died and left me. My mom, couldn't be a mother, and just poor pitiful me,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
What was one of the patterns that Janie helped you see that you were just repeating?
Uh, Probably I'd have to go back to my childhood with my mother,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the things that I was projecting onto her, or accusing her of doing or being or whatever, I was doing myself, maybe a different story attached to it, but the
Yeah.
same, the same thing, definitely.
And that is typical when we begin to question our patterns. What we begin to see is that we are projecting out into the world. We're repeating what was taught to us. And yes, it might look slightly different, but it's always going to have the same flavor underneath it all. So give me one of those projections. What was one example?
Hmm. Uh, oh, that's kind of hard. I don't know. I've got some resistance there. I don't know if I want to.
That's okay. If there's a resistance, then we don't have to go there, because we are always only ready to reveal whatever is ready to be revealed. And part of this journey is an opening, as you know. We're opening ourselves completely. We are opening up our mind, we're questioning our beliefs, we're opening up our heart, our emotions, and nobody should go there if they're not ready. So if that's
I think I'm sorry. I think one of the biggest things that I found was that I was so angry at my mother for not being there for me, and for not being able at the time to be a mothering person and take care of me.
Yeah.
And at 21, 22, I was experiencing some of that for myself, because I didn't go through the party teenage years and live it up or whatever. I grew up really fast.
Yeah.
So once I hit my divorce at 19 or so, and then by the time I had Parrish, I felt like I had missed that whole part of my life. So in some ways, I think I started to fall back into what some people go through at 16, 17, 18 years old before they have children,
Yeah.
early in life. So I got to see things from a different perspective and understand my mother on a much different level, and have a great deal of compassion and empathy for her
Yeah, but that's
and what
something,
she might have been going through.
yeah, that's something that you gain later on, the compassion. How old were you when you had your first child?
22.
Okay. So you get out of a divorce and you're feeling like your mother had not been there to help prepare you. And then all of a sudden you have a child. So all of these things are getting piled on. And tell me, describe, who were you at that time? What kind of a person were you handling what was going on while you're feeling, your mom's not there and now you have a new baby? Take me to that time in your life, and to the best of your ability, don't speak so much to what you now know about yourself and the work that you've done, but paint a picture of what was going through your mind. What were your fears? What were your concerns? What were your angers, your angst during that time?
I was depressed and driven. If that's even possible to have
Well,
both
it
at the
is.
same time.
It is. It
That
is.
is how I felt.
It is. And I'll tell you why those two things happen at once. When we get depressed, when we are ready to go through a transformation, we become driven to move through that depression. But not everybody's going to be driven during depression because they're not ready for transformation. So it makes perfect sense. So take me through that depression and that drive that you had, and let's share. We've got a wonderful, nice, big audience here. So let's share with them, who was Chasity at that time that you were depressed and driven?
So I was really depressed and upset about my dad and him not being here. It was hard for me to admit that I was angry at him.
Yeah.
So that was a struggle, and held me in that space, I think, for a long time. The drive came from my son. Once we found out he was born with cataracts, they told us he could be blind.
Yeah.
And that was unacceptable.
Yeah.
So that's where I found my drive. I made that my life, literally. Like, that was everything. That he was my sole focus. I found all the information I could, and just threw myself into that, to the point that that's all I was. I was just this mother trying to save her kid. And that gave me purpose. And I lost everything else in my life. Nothing else mattered. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I was doing good to shower, I mean, I'd take care of him and everything he needed, but I don't know. It was like I slowly faded away. And
yeah. But what you're saying, though, makes perfect sense, because when we're operating asleep, what runs our lives primarily is our ego mind. And our ego is a self-protective mechanism. It's all about survival. So when we're completely unconscious to our divine essence, we're operating strictly from our human primal self. So it becomes all survival about ourselves. So if you are having a hard time with not feeling like your mother's there, well, there's a sense of having to protect yourself. And of course, that would make sense that would add to your depression. And then you lose your father. And now you have a baby. So now the survival gets transferred from your survival to your baby's survival. But that's still unconscious behavior, because you're operating as if the only thing that can save your son is you, where before the only thing that could save you was your mother. So we assign responsibility to humans. So take me to when you began to go through that awakening. That how do you begin to realize that there's more to life than just our ego? That you began to realize that you could tap into something, that drive, that passion. Take me to that place. When did that start? How many years after Parrish was born did you begin to get curious?
2011.
Okay.
A friend of mine had just died and taken her own life. And another friend in need needed me.
Yeah.
So we ended up in this class that Janie had introduced me to and recommended for me to go to for a long time. And I wouldn't do it for myself.
Yeah.
At that time in my life, I didn't care enough about myself, to do it, to actually commit to it.
That's a really good point, because when we're early on the journey and we begin to get messages from people, suggestions about courses to go to, books to read, maybe even movies to watch, we tend to be resistant until we're ready. I know, because I went through that as well. I had friends who were doing all that they could to expose me to things that could have helped me, but I just wasn't ready. So you recognize that you were not ready. You got your little puppy there?
I'm sorry. The
Don't
kids
worry.
let her out and she got into the candy bag.
No worries. She's
It's
precious.
okay.
She's part of our divine oneness. So take us then back to that place. So Janie's making suggestions. You're resisting them. What were some of the thoughts that you were having that had you justify why you were resisting going?
I was strong enough to handle it on my own. I didn't need any help. That was it.
That's typical.
I didn't need any help. To do something like that was to admit weakness. And I wanted to give you have to understand, even though I was feeling all of this and going through all of this stuff, I would never let anybody else know that at the time. It took me a while to get to that place of vulnerability and be able to admit, I'm not doing so good. Even the day my dad died, it was, okay, this needs to be handled and that needs to be handled. And I've put on that strong face and I didn't want to show weakness.
Is that one of your...
Now I cry at everything.
Me too. So was that one of your protective masks? The not going to show any weakness. I've got it under control.
Mm-hmm.
Very typical.
Absolutely.
Very typical of people when we're unconscious. Again, because in that survival mode, what begins to happen is that we believe that we have to do it all by ourselves, because that's what the ego is I'm a separate little self in the middle of this big bad world, and I got to take care of me. I got to protect me. Okay, so Janie tells you about this event. You're resisting. You don't want to show your weakness. And then what happened with your friend that got you to actually participate and share the name of the event? Because I want people to hear about all the wonderful services and teachings and programs that are out there. I mean, there are thousands of them.
Absolutely. Well, the name of the class was Essence of Being.
Yeah.
And I finally decided to go because I had a friend, as I said, he had just lost his wife and he was going through a really hard time. And we both were.
Yeah.
At that time, he was definitely, I didn't know what that was, but he was definitely a mirror for me majorly. So me being the fixer, I focused my sights on him and I wanted to go in support of him.
Yeah.
And it still wouldn't even admit it was for myself at that time, not until the end of the class.
Yeah.
By the end of that weekend, things were very different.
So how so? Tell me, what made it different?
The walls came down. Yeah. I didn't even realize that I was blocking myself from all the things I really wanted so much, which was love and support and just to really feel connected.
Yeah.
So, I wanted more than anything to be connected and loved and supported by the people around me. And I just thought that people weren't giving it. I didn't realize that I was blocking it. Yeah. and shutting it down and not allowing it to come in. So that weekend changed that. Burge is the facilitator of the class, and her husband was there helping her that weekend.
Yeah.
They really set the room and set the pace for a whole room to be there, just supporting each other and give you an experience that allows you to feel that again. And it's powerful for somebody that's been shut down for as long as I have been.
It really is. And I want to, again, thank you for your vulnerability, because you're sharing some very intimate things, but it's in the sharing of how we go through these spiritual awakenings and what we experience that it really makes it so much easier for other people. And like I said, we've got a really big audience. Thank you to everybody who's watching us right now. I really appreciate you being there and hope that what you're hearing Chasity share is going to be helpful to you. So one of the things, Chasity, that you were saying is that you attended an Essence of Being workshop, and Burgess is a good friend of mine, as you know. I highly, highly recommend anybody who's watching this to look up essence of being, because it is a transformational workshop. It gives us an opportunity to begin to look at those walls that Chasity is talking about that we create. So tell me about those walls. Give me an idea of what some of those walls are so that the audience can see if they too have those walls.
Well, I mean, one was just the wall to connection and love, period. I mean, I wanted it and I was asking for it. I thought I was, but I wasn't really letting it in, period. I thought, I now know, I didn't understand this back then, but I thought I didn't deserve it. Something was wrong with me. I always felt like something was wrong with me. I mean,
well, it's a pattern that we pick up as children, because that's what begins to form our ego. Our ego is the idea, you know, A Course in Miracles says it's a tiny mad idea. It really is a crazy, insane idea that we're separate. Just because we have these physical bodies and we see a separate mom, a separate dad, separate siblings, a separate dog, a separate house, you know, we walk from this house to that house, so we believe that we're separate from one another, and the world kind of gives us evidence of that. When we begin to believe that we're separate, if a parent just one time doesn't have time to hold us for whatever reason, we begin to feel like we don't matter, like we're something wrong with us, or we're different. So it makes perfect sense that that was one of your walls, because it's actually one of everybody's walls. As a coach now for over 12, almost 12 years, that's always one of the walls that every single person I've worked with has to look at, is the I'm not good enough, that there's something wrong with me. So what was it like for you to begin to become aware of that wall?
And I mean, it's so hard to describe. It was confusing at first and pretty scary, but it felt amazing to finally feel connection again with the people around me, and not, actually it was a release, like a relief, and lighter. I felt a lot lighter. I didn't have to walk around with this, you know, I'm tough, I got to be strong shell anymore. But you know, that opened the floodgates too.
Exactly.
So
Same.
I mean, I think I cried that whole weekend, which was specific to me. Not everybody there had that experience, but I'd just been holding things in for so long that I didn't even realize were a problem for me.
Well,
and
you were also a mom. So you're discovering things about you that are tapping into your own children, because you don't want your children to grow up with that sense of not belonging, of not being good enough, not being...
That was hard.
Yeah, exactly. So you're feeling for you and you're feeling for your children.
And that was it. As those walls started to come down, I realized where some of them come from, some of these beliefs I had running, where they came from. And I could see how I was doing the same thing to my children.
Exactly.
In trying to hide my pain from them, I was disconnecting and leaving them in the space that I lived in for years. That was hard. That was really hard to face.
Yeah, that is always a very difficult thing to face, because what we begin to realize, and it's part of what allows us to feel our oneness with one another, because as you began to see how you were doing to your children what you believed your parents were doing to you, that's how we begin to break the chain of pain. So now take me to the forgiveness and compassion that has to happen for you to be able to release your mother and get your power back, and then begin the process of doing the work with your own children. So speak to that time frame and that process that you went through.
Well, bringing those walls down and then seeing what I was doing, it brought a lot of guilt and shame. So I spent years trying to forgive my mother and all of that. That did it pretty quickly. That part came easy. What wasn't as easy as forgiving myself.
Yes. Speak a little to that.
My children helped.
Talk about your process. Talk about your process in beginning to forgive yourself, because that is one of the quintessential aspects of this spiritual journey. If we don't come back to forgive ourselves, we cannot wake up. We will stay in chasing, in being a spiritual seeker and chasing that high of this self-discovery, and that high of a workshop, that high of a
Yes.
new book, a new,
I did that a few years.
yes, a new reading, a new whatever, a new chant. But speak to that, because that's the nitty gritty of the journey. So when you had to go inside and begin that process of self-forgiveness, tell us about that. What was that like for you? What were some of the processes that you did? Please go ahead and take your time. And I know that, again, this is a very vulnerable thing, so thank you for doing that. But share it in as much detail as possible so that we can help others not be afraid of doing that, because it's a very scary thing when you don't know what you're getting into and you know you're about to begin a process of self-forgiveness.
Well, it was pretty difficult. I spent a lot of years resisting it and still trying to blame everybody outside of me, because I did to look at yourself and,
Yeah.
and admit the things that have happened. But someone told me, and who was it? I don't remember actually who these wise words come from. It may have been Burge. It may have been Janie. I don't know. But somebody said, and this stuck with me, was don't beat yourself up for the things you didn't know before you learned them.
Exactly.
That statement, that is what got me started finally on self-forgiveness. And people kept showing up in my life, and that was the advice that was coming to me to give to them.
Yeah.
So I heard it a lot.
Yeah.
I found that I reached deeper and deeper within myself through connecting and interacting with the people around me, because they were all mirrors, all of them.
Well, and going from being unconscious to being conscious, it's like entering a whole new world. It's a whole different language. It's a whole different mindset. It's totally, completely a different way of being. So, of course, we did not know what we did not know, but we need to hear that so that we can be kind and gentle with ourselves, because it really, this whole process is in many ways, it's revealing our ignorance. And the ignorance that is getting revealed is that we've been operating with very incorrect information. And that's a very startling process to begin to see, wow, I've been living all my life inside of a story that I'm not good enough, I'm not special enough. And then you begin to ask yourself, well, how come I didn't know that I had another option? And that is really, really uncomfortable to see how we have been not only ignorant, but in so many ways, we have had opportunities to learn about this, but we resisted it. And then we feel very bad that we passed on the options to become aware. And then on top of that, we were ignorant for so long. So it really is
It hurts so many people.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
In the process. I mean,
yeah.
You almost, for me anyway, it delayed me. Or I feel like it delayed me in a lot of ways, because I couldn't face that. It just broke my heart that I hurt so many people without knowing it, without meaning to, even with the best of intentions.
Yeah.
And that was hard.
Yeah, that is hard. But then you come to a place of spiritual maturity where you begin to realize that everybody is where they're supposed to be on their journey. And the hurts that we have participated in with others, or others participated in with us, as you know, one of my sayings, every irritation is an invitation. So we get irritated, we get invited into looking at, well, what was the lesson there? So speak now from the place that you're gaining the spiritual awareness. You're beginning to realize that you have options. You're getting the strength, if you will, to begin to make decisions that are for your higher good, that are better for you and better for others. So speak to what began to happen as you began to recognize that you were accepting your own divine essence, because that is what this work leads us to. We have been taught that God is outside of us somewhere on a cloud, dispensing punishments. But the spiritual journey is a recognition, like we were taught from thousands of years ago, that the kingdom of heaven is within. So you're tapping into your divinity. So speak to that relationship that you're developing with your higher power, your inner strength, And let's just set the stage for that. And then we're going to be talking about that going forward, how you're living your life from that space.
Well, things get a lot easier when I remember to tap into that space.
Yeah.
It's not that I'm always in it and things are always in the flow. Definitely not. I think I sleepwalk a lot as an exercise we did the other night
Yeah.
showed. But yeah, I mean, I don't really know how to put that other than it definitely, everything got easier. There was, let me think of that for a second.
Take your time. And you may want to start with what does that higher power is, describe that. Let's start there with what does that mean to you? What were you discovering about it?
Well, a higher power for me is just something that's always been within me. That's a part of everything. It's how we're all connected.
Yeah.
And how the answers that I've been looking for so many years aren't anywhere to be found outside of me.
Yeah.
So it was learning to do that check-in and just feel, I mean, just really the thing that I'd shut down years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember it as a child. I remember just doing things, not even knowing why.
Yeah.
But that it was just right and that it felt right. And right's not even the right word. It felt easy.
Yeah.
It felt like a magnet. This is where I am. And it's definitely preferable to live my life from that space.
Well, when we're little, we have that intuitive connection, that intuitive guidance, and we know intuitively that something is moving us. Because when we're little, where does that desire to go play, go dance, go move, go play with a puppy, go jump in a puddle, where the heck does that come from if it's not something that we've been taught? So we have that innate essence, that soul, spirit aspect of ourselves. But so much of that is what gets squashed. It's what we get trained out of. It's what we become unaware that is there when we begin to jump the hoops of the conditioning that humanity gives us. So once you begin to have to do what mother, father, teacher, preacher, the world, the government tells you is what you should do, you stop listening to your own inner voice. And as we begin to stop listening inside, that's when our life begins to get darker, because that's our light. That is a dishonoring of the magnificence of the divine essence that is inside of us. So as you begin to tap into that and you begin to remember that you have all of this knowledge inside of you, all of this knowingness, take me from there. Then what began to happen in your life when you're tapping into your own inner voice?
How do I pick just one thing? So many different things. Well, I guess in the beginning, when I first started awakening, things got very easy with my son. The doctors had told us, oh, he's going to be blind and he's not going to be able to do this and that and whatever. And he, was just blowing them all away. Yeah. Very smart, highly, highly intelligent, never delayed on anything as far as walking and talking and all of that good stuff. And it's like all the services, everything we needed just was there. It was just as fast as you could think it was almost handed to us. I mean, even things that we didn't realize at the time were necessary or that we needed, and that's continued when we allow it.
So what do you attribute to that? Because that's key that we talk about that here.
It's allowing, trusting that that I am fully supported and taken care of, and that I am strong enough, but don't have to be strong enough to do everything on my own, and that I'm supported, and not supported by other people per se, but by the universe itself, just divinely
Well,
what's meant to be is coming.
yeah, that's one of the cornerstones on this journey. One of the cornerstones is we begin to realize that we covered up our light. The other one is that we begin to allow our light to be what guides us. And when you begin to be inner guided, like you said earlier, that essence that is inside of you is what connects all of us. So now,
Yes.
no longer are we inside of that ego mind survival mode. It's me against the world. But now you tap into your light and you're connected with everything. Now all of a sudden you realize it's me with the creator of the world. So of
And I
course,
wanted to share it with everybody.
yes,
I mean, at that point in my life, it's like, and I can remember this as a child, but as an adult, it was a beautiful thing to be able to see the light in other people.
yeah,
Um, Most definitely. And I seem to be, for a long time, drawn to the people who'd forgotten their light was there. So it's like, that
exactly.
was my new purpose. Is I like, oh, you're so bright and shiny. I want to make sure you know it. I mean, and I guess that's still kind of like that. Just maybe with a different insight now as I've moved through things a little bit
Well, as we
and not taken
begin,
on.
yeah, as we begin to mature, I know before I had spiritual maturity, I was pretty reckless. I knew all this information and I wanted others to have it. But it's like that story about the when the caterpillar is turning into a butterfly and you watch the little cocoon moving and you want to help the butterfly come out. I was trying to help my friends who I knew were butterflies, and I was trying to pry open the little cocoon to let them out. Well, they weren't
Mm-hmm.
ready. They were not ready to see some of the things that I was seeing, just as I wasn't ready to see some of the things that I saw at the time that other people were trying to, poke my little cocoon and tell me, get out of the darkness. So we do some what I'm going to call reckless things. However, as you know, through A Course in Miracles, there are no mistakes. So whatever it is that we think we did to somebody else that shouldn't have done, part of the forgiveness process is recognizing the perfection of it all. So now that we have spiritual maturity, now we know we have that discernment to leave people alone, that when they are in that space that they're not ready, well, we respect that. So take me to where you are in your life now, because you're doing some remarkable things. You have a daughter also. I know we've been talking about your son, but you also have a daughter that has had a lot of her own stuff coming up, a lot of her own medical issues. With the awareness that you now have today, instead of being the typical parent like your parents were that trained you because it's all that they knew to do, to become a frightened girl. What are you doing with your children? How are you empowering your children? And then give us some examples of the ways that you're helping them tap into their own light, because that's what conscious parenting is all about.
Oh, well, for one, I try to talk to them about my own awarenesses. Like when I realize I've been behaving a certain way, or
Yeah.
I catch myself, and rather than sitting in all the guilt and the shame, I try to just acknowledge where I'm at and how I see it, and talk with them about it, because I feel like it gives them the permission to do the same. Permission
Exactly.
to
Do you know that?
make a mistake, but
Yeah. That's one of the things that I've noticed in all my years in coaching. Parents who want to tell their children what they should do, how they should do things, are actually handicapping their children, because they're causing their children to not listen to the voice inside, and they become people pleasers. They become crowd followers. They become desensitized to a source of power and strength that is inside of them. So thank you for being a conscious parent and sharing not only what you learned, but also giving them a voice. So say more about that, please.
they they definitely teach me a lot more than I teach them.
Yeah.
I try to follow their lead. I mean, uh, um, yeah. So both of my kids are really loving and trusting of most people.
Yeah. But you also have two children that have a lot of medical things. So we've talked about Parrish. Now talk about your daughter and some of the things that you've been doing to help her, because those medical issues, especially when you're so young, and hers, because it's physical,
Yeah.
She's had to put up with a lot of teasing and taunting from others. So speak to how, from your new conscious awareness as a parent who knows that your child's strength comes in from within. That creator, that God spirit, whatever you want to call it, is the light that is inside of her. It's her soul, her essence. Speaks to how are you helping her remain conscious of that so that she can tap into that.
So Paxton has severe eczema and allergies and has pretty much since she was 4 months old. It's been a long journey with all of that. It's difficult to watch your child in pain.
Yes.
And she's probably the strongest person I've ever met in my life when it comes to pain. But she, ooh,
You're doing awesome. Take your time.
yeah. You know, we try to let Paxton kind of guide us to whatever's going to work for her. Even at a really young age, she wouldn't eat certain foods or, certain things she kind of steer clear of. And so we we tried to kind of pay attention to that.
Yeah.
At first we didn't realize that it's like she naturally knew the foods that were bad for her.
Yeah.
Or whatever. So, but oh gosh, you threw me for a loop with that one. I don't even know where to start. Like we spent 9 years dealing with doctors and conventional medicine and, struggling with decisions on whether to throw this chemical on her or that chemical on her and all the steroid creams. And we've just tried so many different things and nothing seemed to be working. And of course it's hard to watch her go through that.
Of course.
But now we've reached the space. About a year ago, she got really bad to the point that we had to go to the emergency room. I mean, she was just covered. And it was that day that we just said, we're done. This is not happening anymore. We're not accepting it. We have to take this into our own hands and get to the root of what's going on here.
Yeah.
Once we made that decision, we we just changed our whole lifestyle, really.
Yeah.
We started looking at food as medicine, and that was a gift. We began to finally see the gift in all that she's been going through. Other than the fact that she has a lot of compassion and empathy for other people, of course. I mean, I do think because of what she's had to go through on her own, she's just got that sweetness about her and really cares and notices when other people are going through something.
Let's talk about, let me take a second here because you were talking about using food as medicine. When we begin the process of awakening, we begin to recognize that the light that is inside of us is the light that is in everything. It's in our food. It's in the planet. It's in the stars. It's in the mountains, the water, the air. It's in everything.
Absolutely.
The creator is energy. The creator is the energy of love that permeates everything and holds everything within itself. So as we begin to become conscious that we are connected to everything, and you are listening to your daughter, she's letting you know what she likes and doesn't like. So you're giving her permission to be a point of awareness, to feel good about her own intuition by you listening to her. So then you begin to look at food as a healing agent. So what are some of the changes that you began to make when you began to realize that you were not going to be giving her dead food, food out of a box, chemicals that are not, healthy for our body? That's a conscious parent that begins to make the decision that there is a life force and you're going to tap into it. So you're tapping into it through food. What began to happen with her as you began to really align in a loving way with what was best for her?
Well, her anxiety got a lot less. Her skin started clearing up.
Yeah.
She went from being shut down, wearing a hoodie, hiding, always being covered up. I mean, just really closed off, even at school, to short sleeve shirts, losing the hoodie, head back, shoulders, shoulders back, head up. Just, she came alive again, I mean, and it wasn't like we didn't just change her diet. We changed everyone's diet. And I mean, everyone in the house eats what she eats. So we ate junk. We really did. We ate a lot of processed foods. We ate canned foods a lot. I mean, anything quick, simple, and easy, that's what we did. And making that change has really been fun for all of us. I mean, we started with like a fresh meal delivery service where it was Blue Apron, whatever. They send you all the ingredients and you prepare it. And it became like a daily thing for all of us. We just had fun with it. So it helped us connect in that way too. Not only were we seeing the physical effects of it, but emotionally and mentally, and I mean, in every way, it improved our lives.
Well, definitely. That's one of the gifts. You were saying there's been a lot of gifts through Paxton's journey, but one of the gifts that we begin to become conscious of is the interconnection between our thoughts, our emotions, our body, and the source, the spirit that we are all one with. So that interconnectedness is part of becoming conscious. That's a beautiful thing. So what is, you, because of what you were doing with your daughter, you now have a business where you are also distributing some health products that you have discovered.
Right.
Because we're doing it in this format, I cannot put the link in it. We'll have to do this afterwards. But what is that product, and how can people, reach out to you to learn more, because it's helped your daughter tremendously?
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's been a godsend. So, a while ago, we've been on this food journey, this healing through food, for about a year, and made a lot of changes, in our household period, just to get more alive and cleaner and greener. But she still had a few problem areas. The problem is her diet has been quite restricted while we're trying to get her gut healed and everything. There's a lot of foods that she isn't able to have at the moment. And we weren't able to get the proper nutrition into her. We tried so many different shakes or, the powdered stuff. I mean, we've tried a lot of different things over the years, and she couldn't tolerate them. She just couldn't get them down. We tried bone broth powder and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And a naturopathic doctor, a friend of mine, Dr. Terry Weil, actually, I think I might have pronounced her name wrong, her last name.
Willie.
Anyway, Dr. Terry. Willie, thank you.
Yes.
I knew I said that wrong as soon as it came out of my mouth. Sorry, Dr. Terry. But she introduced me to a nutritional program, and she gave great rave reviews on it. It had just helped her so much with, some of her issues. And of course, they can't claim to cure anything or anything like that, and that's not what it's about. But it is a full nutritional program.
Yeah.
That
has helped your daughter. I mean, you have firsthand experience. Yes.
So we started her just on the shakes, and within 3 days, and the only reason I tried it is because she said, if it doesn't work, you get your money back in 30 days. Because I'm like, we've spent thousands of dollars on all of this kind of stuff, and nothing ever works. But here we go. So I gave it to her. She did the cookies and cream flavor and loved it. And 3 days later, she's like, Mommy, I feel really good and my sores are healing. And I'm like, oh, okay. Wow. I didn't really look at them that day. I was like, okay. So I'm talking to Brian about it. And a couple of days later, I take a look, and in these places, you have to understand, she hasn't healed since she was a baby.
Wow.
I mean, she's had these sores in this space other than when she was on oral steroids, which are terrible and killing her liver.
Yeah.
They have not been cleared since she was a baby. So to look at this and to see that her skin was just pink and they had all started to heal.
Wow.
I was blown away. I'm like, oh my God. So I started looking around and asking some questions, and found out that actually quite a few of my friends have been on this program for like 6 years with beautiful results.
Okay.
All kinds of health issues that have gotten better just with good nutrition. And that's it. It's not a miracle. It's just an easy way to get good nutrition in your body. And So our whole family jumped on board. My son's asking for the shakes. Brian and I, it's our year to get healthy and focus on our wellness even more. I mean, we did it in baby steps. We started with the food, and now this is just that extra little boost, you know.
Yeah. Well, that's all part of the process of becoming conscious. We begin to integrate mind, body, spirit, and our connection to the universe, that our connection to everything. We begin to realize how we're connected or disconnected by paying attention to our emotions, our feelings, and so there is a holistic aspect to the awakening process. This journey is about waking up every single aspect of our lives, awakening to that there is so much to who we are. What's the website, so that if anybody's interested, that they can go look it up?
It is chastityclark.isogenics.com.
Okay, so spell Chastity in case people don't know how to spell that.
Okay, it is CHASITYCLARK .isogenics, and that's ISAGENIX.com. You can just call me. You can just call me and message me. I'd be happy to help you.
Yeah.
And answer some questions for
Cute
you.
little puppy. So let's go ahead. We're coming to the top of the hour. So what I want you to share with me is going through this awakening has not been easy. You've had to look at your beliefs. You've had to let go of judgments. You've had to let go of blaming your parents for what they did or didn't do as part of your own healing journey. So tell me about, who are you today? How is your mind? How are your emotions? I know it's a journey, so it clearly we have our ups and downs. But compared to who you were before you started becoming aware that there's a divine light in you, who are you showing up as today?
I think I'm definitely much more at peace now. I don't spend as much time in the trenches and depressed or playing the blame and shame game with all the people in my life.
Yeah.
It's easier to hold myself accountable.
Yeah.
and also easier to reach that level. It's like I don't even have to reach the level of forgiveness in most areas of my life because I'm already forgiven by the time I get there, which is nice. It's it's a daily practice. It really is. I feel like I learn a little more, get a little further every day. And sometimes I'll have a lot of things in life going on and a week will go by and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, where the hell have I been for the last week? I mean, it's definitely a lot less than it used to be, though. I think I used to spend probably years walking around like that, whereas now I'm definitely more aware of what's going on around me and more conscious of it.
Yeah, so you can make some conscious decisions and be able to be present, because that's part of this awakening journey, brings us present to the moment so that we're not operating with past thoughts in our mind. Because when we're operating with thoughts from the past, it's always about what we're going to plan for the future. It's always a manipulation, a trying to get something, a trying to protect something. And it keeps us disengaged with life when we're operating in a reactive mode. So that clarity that you're talking about, that's beautiful, and it helps us become more curious.
And not being as reactive. That's probably the biggest bonus, not only for me, but for the people in my life.
Exactly.
They're probably very happy that I'm not as reactive. But the thing recently that's been helping me the most, really, Laina, is doing the work in the Course of Miracles with you and the mind training that we've been going, the daily lessons and the teacher's manual. And that, I mean, it's been a whole new journey, and it's really exciting.
Well, I love teaching A Course in Miracles. When I discovered that 6 years ago, it just blew my mind how I had been prepared, because the courses that I had been receiving, the power of awareness and my coaching and all of that, when I was receiving that guidance, I had no idea that it was preparing me to become a teacher for A Course in Miracles, which is one of the remarkable things about this journey. You were talking about allowing and trusting and not asking, how is this supposed to happen? But rather there's a guiding that takes place that moves us to the right thing at the right time. So it really is remarkable. And I love having you part of that spiritual mastery, because it is. We're on a 1-year journey because it takes time. This is a process that takes time. But tell me, who have been some of your, you talked about Essence of Being, but what have been some of your favorite teachings, teachers, books that have left an impact on your life that our audience could benefit from hearing how some of these things were stepping stones on your journey?
Well, in the beginning, I'd say definitely Burge with Essence of Being.
Yeah.
Your class with Power of Awareness was, I felt like it was, I don't even know how to describe. I don't want to say like the next level up, but it was definitely a missing link for me, majorly. It took me from the surface deeper, and it was exactly what I needed at that point in my life. It was incredible. I did some work with David Kraft doing some attachment releases. Yeah. And for me, that was really powerful. And it was actually, he did it through, what's her name? Joyce Hovis. Okay. Take Charge and Live. He did it through her stuff. I'd never heard of it, but he introduced me, and that was awesome. We did a release a week. We did it very slowly, and it was just incredible to see the things that woke up from that.
Yeah. And those attachments, that's something we all have to look at. And attachments are how we have made something outside of ourselves responsible for our happiness, or responsible for our unhappiness. And we have to look at how we have attached ourselves, be it to things, be it to people. We have to release those attachments. Otherwise, we are not free to be ourselves, because we're hooked into other people and other things.
Absolutely.
What were some other things after you did that work that you would So thank you for the relief for Mama. So what are some,
I was like, I'm hoping you're watching. Just come take her.
So what are some of the other teachings and books that you would recommend?
Definitely A Course in Miracles.
Yeah.
Wayne Dyer got me through a lot of dark days.
Yes.
A great book to read for me was Dark Night of the Soul. Mm-hmm. I also enjoyed, I may say this wrong, but it's Dark Side of the Light Chasers.
Yes, the Debbie Ford book.
Yes,
I recommend that to so many people, because it is a wonderful book. The Dark Side of the Light Chasers is exactly what the title means. As we're chasing the light, as we're chasing becoming enlightened, as we're chasing the highs, the joys, the fun of life, we have this dark side we have to look at. And that dark side is all of our suppressed trauma, all of the things that from our past that we have not looked at, the beliefs that we have, the agreements that we have made that cause those attachments, that our happiness comes from status, our happiness comes from mommy or daddy, our happiness comes from money, our safety comes from believing a religion, or our well-being comes from eating certain foods or taking certain supplements. When we believe that there's something outside of us that has our power, we're attached to that. And if it's not a very clear guidance to using those things, to being in those relationships, we're operating from attachments. And that is the dark side that we have to look at. So yes, I love that book. I recommend that to just about everybody that I work with.
Yes.
When I feel that they need to have that awareness. Of course, a lot of people that I work with are so advanced in their spiritual journey. Many of them have already done that work and are already aware of that, because as you know, I only help people who know that they're transcending their ego. So I don't have to explain what the ego is. I don't have to explain childhood trauma. We're focusing on our connection with the light, with the divine inside, with the kingdom of heaven that's already there. In many ways, with the teachings that Jesus has given us, which is that we need to renew, we transform ourselves by renewing our mind. Now, the last thing I want to ask you is to share, what is your practice, your spiritual practice? How do you stay connected to the truth of who you are now that that has began to awaken within you?
Well, I just give myself that space of some peace and quiet to be alone with myself. And that's important.
Yeah.
When I get too busy in life and skip giving myself that time and space to just be with myself and just listen, things get hectic and don't run as smoothly. And I still fall into that pretty often. But thankfully I have a lot of people in my life that care enough about me to, hey, just give me that reminder.
And when you go inside, when you're listening, what are you listening for? Because we hear that I'm listening, I'm getting quiet, but what are you listening for? Because that's important for us to understand. What is it that we're listening for?
How can I describe that? It's not that I'm actually hearing anything. It's just that I'm giving myself the space to quiet my mind and see what pops up and not spend any too long of amount of time circling around trying to figure out whatever it is that's popping up in my mind. And it's a feeling, really. It's like guidance. I don't know how to describe that. For me, it's almost like a video game. I don't know if any of you have ever played one of those games, but you don't really know what you're supposed to do next. You don't have like written instructions, but there's a little light for where you're supposed to go.
Yeah. And
it's a difficult thing to describe, but
that makes perfect sense. So what do you believe that guidance is coming from? To you, what is the source of that?
Well, that's hard to describe too. I feel like it's a piece of everything, the energy that we all share.
Yeah. Do you have
I call it God, but only because I'm comfortable calling it that now. For years, I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and for years I was not comfortable with God or the idea of the story of God. Now I have a very different feeling on that. So I call it God. I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Or the universal energy that's equally
I went
fitting.
I grew up Catholic, and I grew up with a fear of God. I grew up with, this judgmental God, and also a fickle God that, Jesus died for our sins, so we're saved, but then we're sinners, so we can't be saved. So it was very confusing how
condemnation and
inconsistent,
damnation.
yes, inconsistent that was. And when I began my own journey and began to feel that God inside of me, that source, that spirit, that energy, which is love. To me, it's all it is.
Yes,
it's pure,
absolutely.
unconditional love. When I began to feel that inside of me, I began to realize that is that personal relationship that we're developing, that is what Jesus teaches through A Course in Miracles, that is what Jesus was when he was alive 2,000 years ago, was saying it's the kingdom of heaven inside of us. So it took me a good 10 years to go from calling it spirit, energy, universe, to now being comfortable with the word God. Actually, I was given in guidance a couple of years ago the word Jesus. And Jesus is really nothing but an acronym for God, source, is the energy of love. So GSEL, Jesus, is God is the source of the energy that we know as love, and it is what we're all made of. So I'm glad to hear that
I agree. Absolutely.
Feel comfortable coming back in and tapping into that God force in you, that power. All right, sweetie, it's been a wonderful interview. You're such a beautiful example of somebody who, at such a young age, committing to doing the work, listening to others who were trying to guide you into looking at your patterns of disempowerment, those repetitive behaviors that kept you stuck going in circles and going nowhere. That she loved you enough to say that, and that you loved yourself enough to hear it, because it requires a lot of courage when somebody tells us, hey, your life could be a lot smoother if you tried something else. Our ego doesn't want us to have been wrong about our way, or to even admit that there could be another way. So thank you for doing this interview with me. I know it's going to help a lot of people. I see the puppy got handed back to you, huh?
They let her loose, and he didn't realize there's candy in the floor, so she's trying to eat the
Oh,
candy. And
all right. Well, you have a magnificent day, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. I really appreciate you, Chasity.
you too. Thank you.
And if you'll do me a
Bye.
favor, and when we post this, go in there and put the link for how people can reach your site if they want to get those same shakes that have been helping your daughter, the isogenic.
Oh, okay, definitely. And it's better to call me so I can save you some money on it specifically.
So put
But
whatever you want to
absolutely, I'll put it on there.
put it in there so people can reach you. Thanks a bunch, and as always, you are truly magnificent, and I love you.
I love you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And I'm going to be doing another Alive or Align with Laina next Monday. And next week, let's see, my guest will be, I've got my list. It will be a person that I absolutely love. Her name is Irene Taylor, and she is absolutely amazing. And after I have my conversation with Irene, then the following week on Monday the 22nd, I'll have a conversation with Jody. So I am blessed to have amazing people who have undergone incredible spiritual awakenings, and I get to interview them so that they can help inspire other people who are going through their own awakening process. We are moving out of believing that we're limited beings and beginning to open up to the possibility that we actually are unlimited. And each one of us is a point of awareness, of expression for the divine source of all that is, Jesus, as I call it, which is God, the source of the energy of love. Thanks a bunch and have a magnificent day, and know that you are loved. Bye-bye.